Welcome to le subjonctif, the verb tense that you never knew existed, but guess what? We have it in English too. We just don't really notice it because there's not as many different forms in English, but we have this in French and other languages too. So our goal eventually is to find out how and when we use it. Today, I'm only going to make a voiceover of telling you the main idea of it and the forms. And then I'm going to make a separate voiceover of the second half of the PowerPoint that gives more examples of how to use it. And this year our goal is mostly going to be getting the forms practiced and a couple of the uses of it, and then we'll review it next year and do more practice with when to use it and when not to use it. So this isn't super important, but these are all things that you know already, that there's different types of verbs. Most of the verbs that we've done are all what we call the indicative, l'indicatif. So present, passé composé, le futur, l'imparfait, basically everything except for this new one, the subjunctive, and except for when we give commands, which is l'impératif. The only reason I show this is because eventually when we're practicing, should I use subjunctive or not, my question is going to be subjunctif ou indicatif. And for us, it's always, when I say indicatif, your choice is actually going to be subjunctive or present tense. But in reality, if you're making your own sentences, depending on what you're talking about, it could be subjunctive or passé composé, subjunctive or future. So this is just something to see what I mean. So our goal today is to find out what are the forms of the present tense of the subjunctive, présent du subjonctif. For a few years, I've added this slide completely in English in here because I started realizing people were like, wait, but what does this mean after we've been doing it for a long time? Here's the thing, the subjunctive doesn't mean anything different from the present tense. And you're like, well, why the heck do I have to use it? There's just some expressions that you have to use the subjunctive after them instead of the regular present tense. Does it mean anything different? No, but you have to use it to technically be correct. So if you say, for example, je veux que, you want to tell someone something you want them to do, the next verb has to be subjunctive, because we're going to find out later that if you're expressing a want, you need subjunctive. So you say, je veux que tu viennes à la fête. And the verb venir is in the subjunctive. If you say, je veux que tu viennes, with viens in the present tense, would people understand you? Yes. But would it be correct? No. So this is what we're going towards. And some of the verbs are going to sound a lot different in the two forms. So how do you form the subjunctive? You start with the il plural form of the verb in the present tense. So like for imparfait, we started with the new form. For the subjunctive, we start with the il plural form. Take off the ent and add these endings. These are the endings for every verb except for avoir and être. E, ESE, IONS, IEZ, ENT. You're going to see that for some of the verbs, they're going to look exactly the same as some other tenses that we know in some of the forms, and it's just context that you can tell the difference, and some they're going to look really different. So let's look at regular verbs. So regular ER verbs like parler, chanter, manger. Conjugate the verb in the il plural form, parle, with ENT. Take off the ENT and we're left with parle. Add the endings. ESE, je parle, tu parles, il parle. IONS, IEZ, ENT. Nous parlions, vous parliez, il parle. So the je, tu, il, and il all sound the same and they all look exactly the same as the present tense. The nous and vous look the same as the imparfait, but again in context we'll know which one you're using. Now, this is why in that one you might not see the importance of using the il plural form, but as we look at these other ones you're going to see the difference. So look at vendre, example of regular RE verbs, vendre, perdre, entendre, etc. Conjugate vendre with ENT at the end, il vend. Take off the ENT and we're left with VEND. So now we have je vende, tu vends, il vend. These actually sound different than the present tense. The present tense ends with S, nothing, and they're pronounced vend. This one you pronounce the D, vend. Nous vendions, vous vendiez, ils vendent. So these are spelled differently than the present tense in many of them. And finally, regular IR verbs like finir, choisir, grossir, maigrir. Absolutely notice the difference if you didn't conjugate this in the il plural form. Ils finissent, ISSENT, take off the ENT and we're left with finis. If we didn't start with the il plural form, we wouldn't have this ISS part here and then we wouldn't have this correct. So this stem goes through all the forms. We've got finis through all the forms. Je finisse, tu finisses, ils finissent, nous finissions, vous finissiez, ils finissent. You can see that the endings are the same no matter the type of verb, but the stem is based on the il plural form of the verb in the present. And then here's just one example, an expression you've seen before, il faut, that we always use subjunctive with. In the past, we've used it to say it is necessary, or one must do something. Il faut travailler pour avoir de l'argent. Here we didn't conjugate travailler because it was the second verb, and we're saying in general, one must work to have money. People must work. We're not talking to someone specific. Now let's say we want to talk to a specific person and say it is necessary that Sarah work to have money. Il faut que Sarah travaille pour avoir de l'argent. To give this necessity to a specific person, I added a que and conjugate subjunctive. This is where we're going to go with this, just so we've seen a little example. I'm going to stop right there for this one, so that we've only done regular verbs, and then make a separate audio voiceover for the irregular ones, and then a separate one for more examples of how to use this.